Hello everyone, in this video we are going to talk about interface in TypeScript. So in this video we are going to cover up these basic points, that is what are interfaces in TypeScript and their optional properties, read-only properties, and then we will combine both optional and read-only properties, and then we will jump next onto interface members as functions, in which we have two syntax for declaring functions, that is property syntax and method syntax, and then we will finally learn about extending interfaces. So let's start with what is an interface. In TypeScript, an interface is a way to define a shape of an object. It is a TypeScript concept that will allow us to define that how can a structure of an object be, including its properties and its method. It provides us a way to specify the expected shape of an object, and then TypeScript can use this information to check that that object conforms to that particular interface to which it is pointing out. Alright. So this is basically an overview of what is an interface. And an interface is defined using an interface keyword. So let's understand more of an interface with some examples. So let's dive into our Visual Studio Code and understand interface in TypeScript. So how are interfaces defined? As I said earlier, interfaces are defined using the interface keyword followed by the interface name. Okay, so we can define interface using interface keyword and then the particular name that we want to give to that specific interface. So here let's say we have a person interface, and in that we have properties such as first name, which is a type of a string, and then we have last name as its second property, which has a type of a string. Okay, so basically what we did here is we just created an interface named person that specifies two property, first name and last name, both of a type string. Okay, and we can use this interface to define object that conforms to this interface. How can we do that? Is by creating a variable const, and we have a person variable which has a type of a person. What I said here is we have a variable called person which has a type of this person, and this person is an interface, right? This is an object which has two properties, first name and last name. So let's initialize their properties down here by saying first name is a string, so it's definitely going to be string. It's, let's say, John. Now you will see here that we have red line. Why there is a red line? Because it says property last name is missing in type this, but it is required in type person. Here we have last name also, and this person variable is required to have last name. Okay, so we have to have last name down here because it's required, and it's string, so it's going to be a string value. All right, so this is where we get the error. If we just miss out any other property like we did here right now, we didn't declare last name, we got an error, red line. What if I try to add any other property which is not in interface here? Let's say age, which is 30, and this age is not an interface, right? So we've got the red line which will say that this object literal may only specify known properties, and age does not exist in type person. Age is not there in this, so it cannot be here also. Okay, so when we remove this, red line will go away. Alright, so this is how we define an interface, or we declare an interface in TypeScript. So now let's talk about optional properties in TypeScript. In TypeScript, we can define optional properties in an interface by using the question mark operator, this operator. Alright, so to define an optional property, we must add a question mark character after that particular property name that we want to be optional. This optional property can be there in an object or it cannot be. TypeScript wouldn't throw an error. So to understand optional properties, let's understand it with example. So let's say we have another interface down here which is named book. Okay, and in this we have a title as its property, which is going to be a type of a string, and then we have another property pages, which is going to be a type of a number. Now to have this pages in book interface to be optional, what I said earlier is we just have to add a question mark operator after that particular property. So now this pages is optional property. It can be there in an object or it cannot be. TypeScript wouldn't raise a complaint. Let's declare an object called book, which is a type of a book interface. Alright, and then we have two properties here, right? So let's say title, which is going to be a string, and that is Harry Potter. Alright, and now when you see I do not have pages property down here and TypeScript isn't raising a complaint. Why is it so? Because pages is optional property, so this is right. Okay, and if I try to add pages property and let's say it's going to be 300, this is also okay. So now let's talk about read-only properties in TypeScript. So as the name suggests, the property will be just read-only. We may want sometimes to define a property which can be just read, it cannot be changed, and we may want sometimes to block users from reassigning properties of object. So for that, TypeScript allow us to add a read-only modifier, that means a read-only keyword before a property name, so that the property should not be set to a different value. To understand this, let's look at example. Let's say we have an interface car, okay, and in this we have model as its property, which is of type string, and then we have year as its another property, which is going to be a type of a number. Okay, so now to define an object which will specify this car interface, let's say we have a variable called car, which is a type of a car, and then we have model and year as two properties. And now to make year as just read-only property, we just have to add read-only keyword. Okay, so read-only keyword before that specific property, we want that to be read-only. So we have model down here, and which is string, right? So I cannot type string here, I'm so sorry. We have to specifically type a model name of that car. We have suppose BMW, okay, and I literally don't know the year when it was launched, so I'm just taking anything. Let's say year is going to be 2023 because it's going on, whatever. Let's say it's 2021, doesn't matter. All right, so now when I try to reassign this car dot year value to something like, let's say 2000s, so you will see that we have got the red line which will say that we cannot assign to year because it's just read-only property. Once it is declared, it cannot be changed. All right, this is how read-only properties work. Okay, we cannot assign any other value to it once it is already declared. Let's combine both read-only properties and optional property. We can also combine both optional and read-only properties. How we can do that is, let's say we have an interface called address, and in that we have properties such as city, which is a type of a string. Then we have state, which is also going to be a type of a string. Then we have pin code as it's another property, which is going to be a number. And then we have country as it's another property, which is going to be again a type of a string. So now to make this pin code an optional property, we can just add question mark here, and now pin code is optional. It can be there in an object or it cannot be there. And to make the state as just read-only property, how we can do that is by adding read-only keyword before that property name. So now state is just read-only, but it is going to be required in an object. Alright, it's just that it's read-only. Its value cannot be reassigned or redeclared. And this pin code can be there in an object or it cannot be. So to create a variable, let's say const address, which is a type of address, and then we have city, right? So let's say it's Mumbai, and then we have state, which is Maharashtra, so I'm just writing MH, and then we have pin code. It can be there or it cannot be, so I'm just leaving this pin code out because I don't want pin code in here. Alright, and then we have country, which is a string, so it's going to be India. Alright, so this is how we declare or we combine read-only properties and optional properties all together. And see, we did not got any error down here, so it's a win. Okay, so now let's talk about functions as member of interfaces. It's really very common in JavaScript and in TypeScript for their members to be functions. And to define a function in interface as its members, we have either ways, property syntax or method syntax, to define a function in interface. And there is just a slight difference between both of them. And the slight difference between them I will tell you in just a few seconds. So let's try to understand property syntax and method syntax. Whichever one you use, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't really affect our code. So let's start with property syntax. Let's say here we have an interface called my property, and then we have function as its member by saying my property function, and then it will going to have parameters, which is required for the function to have parameters, which will have parameter 1, which has a type of a string, and then we have parameter 2, which is a type of a number. And then this my property function is also going to have return type, which will give by this using arrow, and we will say that it's going to be a boolean type. What we did here is we created an interface called my property, and then we have my property function, then we have this semicolon, and in this my property function we have parameter 1 and 2 with type of string and number respectively, and this my property function has a return type of boolean. This is how we type our property syntax. How about method syntax? We can do it similarly. Let's say we have an interface called my method, alright, and in that we have my method function, okay, and then directly we will point like parameter 1 is going to be of type number, and then we have parameter 2, which is also going to be a type of a number, And as you will see here that we have got such a big red line, and when we hover over it, it will say that my method function lacks return type annotation, and it has implicitly any return type which is not allowed in TypeScript, remember. So my method function should have a return type. And how do we define it? By using the semicolon and by saying that my method function is going to be of return type number. So you see there is just this slight difference. The slight difference is also that both functions can have optional property. Okay, but the thing here is this method function cannot have read-only property, and when I add on read-only property to it, you will see that it's giving us that read-only modifier can only appear on a property declaration or index signature. Do not care about it. What it's saying is that you cannot have my method function as read-only, but you can have my property function as read-only. So property syntax can have their functions to have read-only modifier, but method syntax cannot have read-only modifiers. So this is just the slight difference between property syntax and method syntax. So now let's talk about extending interfaces. Alright, in TypeScript, an interface can be extended using extends keyword. This allows us to create new interface that inherit properties and methods from the existing interface. Let's understand extending interface with example. Let's say we have an interface called animal, okay, and in that we have properties such as name, which is going to be of type string, and then we have age, which is going to be of type number. So this is basically how we create an interface, right? But what if I want to have another interface, let's say interface dog, which will extend animal interface, and this dog interface have property called breed, alright, which is going to be of type string. So what we just did here is we created an interface called animal, which have two properties, name and age, of type string and number respectively, and then we have down here another interface dog, which will extend to animal interface. That means this dog interface also have name and age properties as its member, because this dog interface has extended the animal interface with another additional property, that is breed. Now, and to use the dog interface, we can create an object that implements this dog interface by saying we have const variable dog, which is of type dog, alright, and then equal sign. Then down here we will have name, which I'm saying here is going to be Rio, and then down here we have age, and let's say it's 3, and then breed property, and it's going to be type of a string, so let's say lab. And if you try to remove the name, you will also get error which will say that name property is missing, but it is required, even though in dog interface it's not there. But this dog interface is extending the animal interface. That means it should have all these three properties, name, age and breed, even if we do not have name and age properties in this interface. But it's extending, right? It's just adding on another property of breed to dog interface. So we should have all the three properties, name, age and breed. So this is how we extend an interface in TypeScript. And now I hope this video cleared interfaces in TypeScript And if you have any queries, you can ask me in the comment section below. I will try to resolve it. So I'll see you in the next video. Till then, have a good day and happy coding. Bye bye.